One of these Sony cameras stored photos on floppy disks. Another shattered the very idea of what a camera body should look like. And the most ridiculous-looking one of all? It actually predicted how we take photos today. Sony was not just building cameras. It was building for a future that had not arrived yet. This is AltBuzz Archives. Hit subscribe because this is exactly the kind of story we live for. And here are 5 Sony cameras that proved it. At number 5, we have the Sony Mavica FD5 and the Mavica FD7. And yes, these cameras saved your photos to floppy disks. The kind you used for school projects. The kind that could barely hold a single modern image. On the surface, it sounds like a punchline. But underneath that absurdity was one of the sharpest instincts Sony ever acted on. In 1997, digital photography was exciting in theory and exhausting in practice. Cables were proprietary. Software was unreliable. Getting a photo from your camera to your computer felt like a part-time job. Sony looked at that friction and decided it was a design problem worth solving. The Mavica FD series saved images directly as JPEG files. No conversion, no special software, no confusion. You pulled the disk out, slotted it into your PC, and your photos were just there. Ready to use. Ready to share. The floppy disk was not elegant. It was slow and capacity limited, and it looked transitional even at launch. But the thinking behind it, that a camera should fit into how people already use computers rather than forcing people to learn something new, that thinking was completely correct. Sony was not solving a photography problem. It was solving a behavior problem. And that instinct is the thread that connects every single camera on this list. What makes the Mavica FD story even more compelling is how little credit it gets in the broader history of digital convenience. Most people remember the format as a joke. Sony was the only brand willing to stake a product line on removing that one specific barrier. The gap between taking a picture and actually doing something with it. That gap still matters today. Sony just noticed it first, and that willingness to prioritize the workflow over the glamour of the technology itself is what separates the Mavica from every other camera of its generation. Here's the detail that most people completely overlook. Sony was not just making sharing easier, it was making photography feel like a natural extension of everyday computing. At a time when most camera companies were still thinking in terms of prints and darkrooms, Sony was thinking in terms of desktops and file folders. That mental shift from photography as a physical process to photography as a digital one is the exact same shift the entire industry spent the next decade trying to make. Sony made it in 1997 on a floppy disk, and almost nobody gave it the credit it deserved. At number 4, we have the Sony DSC-F717. And the moment you see it, something registers as immediately unusual. The lens rotates. The body splits into 2 sections connected by a swiveling joint, and the lens module swings independently from the grip. It looked futuristic to some people, toy-like to others. What it never looked like was a normal camera, and that was entirely the point. Sony's F-series design language had been building toward this idea for years, and the F717 was that concept fully matured. This was not a quirky prototype. It was a confident, capable camera wrapped in a shape that deliberately rejected every visual habit that film-era cameras had established. Where other manufacturers were still producing cameras that gestured toward traditional rectangular bodies, that reassuring solidity that signaled serious tool, Sony went a completely different direction. It asked what a camera should look like if you designed it purely for digital behavior. The rotating lens was not decorative. It let you shoot above crowds, low to the ground, and at angles a fixed lens camera simply could not reach. The design delivered on its promise. But more than the functionality, the F717 was making a cultural statement. Digital cameras do not need to look like they descended from film. They deserve their own identity. Decades later, as articulating screens and flexible ergonomics became standard across every camera category, that statement started sounding less radical and more obvious. There is something quietly courageous about a camera company shipping a product that looks this different from everything else on the shelf. Sony was not hedging, it was committing to a shape, to a philosophy, to a version of what a camera could be that no one else was willing to draw. The F717 did not just rotate its lens, and in many ways, it rotated the entire conversation about what camera design was allowed to look like, and the industry eventually followed. What is easy to forget is that the F717 was not a limited concept piece tucked away in a trade show booth. It was a consumer product. It was on shelves. Sony was saying this openly, publicly, and commercially, that the future of camera design did not have to look anything like the past. That level of confidence in an unproven idea is rare in any industry. And the fact that modern cameras now routinely feature tilting bodies, flexible viewing angles, and designs built around the shooter's movement rather than traditional aesthetics, that is the F717's quiet legacy, finally receiving the recognition it earned. At number 3, we have the Sony DSC-R1, and this is where the tone of this countdown changes. The cameras before it were interesting, unusual, even a little amusing. The R1 is none of those things. The R1 is genuinely impressive, because when you understand what it actually was, it stops feeling like a mid-2000s curiosity and starts feeling like something someone might announce today. Released in 2005, the R1 housed an APS-C class sensor inside a fixed lens body. No mirror box, no interchangeable lens system, just a large imaging sensor, a fixed optic, and a camera designed to deliver serious image quality without asking the buyer to commit to an entire ecosystem of lenses and accessories. The market had no clean category for this. Enthusiasts who wanted a large sensor bought DSLRs. Consumers who wanted simplicity bought compacts. The R1 sat between those worlds, and being hard to categorize was a serious commercial disadvantage at the time. But fast forward 20 years, and that same idea is celebrated. The premium large sensor fixed lens camera is now a segment manufacturers actively compete in. Sony was building toward that in 2005. The R1 did not get the commercial moment it deserved, but it planted a seed the whole industry eventually grew toward. This is the pivot point of this countdown, where the story stops being nostalgic and starts being genuinely hard to argue with. The R1 also tells you something important about Sony's confidence as a company. It did not wait for the market to create demand before supplying the answer. And it looked at where image quality and simplicity were both heading, drew a line between those 2 points, and built a camera at that intersection, years before anyone else arrived there. That kind of forward commitment is rare in any industry. In the camera world of 2005, it was almost unheard of, and yet the R1 never got a successor. Sony moved on, and the concept sat quietly in the background while the rest of the industry slowly built toward it. That silence is actually part of what makes the R1 so fascinating. It was not the beginning of a product line, it was a single, perfectly placed prediction. A standalone statement that asked the market a question it would not be ready to answer for another decade. Sometimes the most important cameras in history are not the ones that sold the most. They are the ones that saw the furthest. Everything so far, the floppy disk workflow, the rotating lens identity, the too early large sensor, these might look like a collection of bold experiments, but look closer at what connects them. Sony was not experimenting with technology for its own sake. It was experimenting with user behavior, asking how people actually want to use a camera, then building the answer before the market knew it needed one. If this kind of deep dive is why you come back here, consider becoming an AltBuzz Archives member. Early access, extended breakdowns, and the knowledge that you are directly keeping this channel independent. Link is right below. Subscribe if you have not already, as the next 2 cameras are where this story becomes impossible to dismiss. At number 2, we have the Sony SLT-A55. And to understand why it matters, you need to understand the problem it was solving. Traditional DSLRs had a fundamental limitation. The mirror that bounced light into the optical viewfinder had to physically flip out of the way every time you pressed the shutter. While it moved, phase detect autofocus went offline. Live view suffered. Video autofocus was slow and inconsistent. Sony looked at that mechanical compromise and decided it was worth dismantling. The A55 used a translucent mirror, fixed and semi-transparent, that let light pass through to the sensor while simultaneously directing a portion of it to the phase detect autofocus module. The mirror never moved, which meant phase detect autofocus ran continuously, through live view, through video, through every moment the camera was active. Sony called it the first commercialization of translucent mirror technology, and the A55 proved it could work at real-world speed inside a real-world body. From the outside, it looked like a slightly odd DSLR. Internally, it was operating on completely different logic. A camera that had surgically removed one of the core trade-offs of the traditional design. It was not yet mirrorless, but it was already chasing the thing mirrorless would eventually deliver. Confident, continuous autofocus that did not care whether you were shooting stills, tracking motion, or rolling video. When that capability became the industry expectation, the A55 stopped looking like a strange compromise and started looking like an early draft of the right answer. What the A55 really reveals is that Sony was not waiting for mirrorless to mature before trying to solve the autofocus problem. It built a bridge, an imperfect in-between machine that acknowledged the old system was straining while the new one was not yet ready. That kind of transitional thinking takes genuine engineering courage. Most companies wait. Sony built the bridge and drove across it, even when the destination was still being constructed on the other side. The deeper you look at the A55, the more it reads like a company in conversation with its own future. Sony knew where it wanted to go. It knew the moving mirror was a dead end. And rather than simply waiting for the right moment to abandon it, we had spent time engineering around its limitations, extracting every last advantage from a system it was already planning to leave behind. That is not confusion. That is strategy. And when the full mirrorless era arrived and continuous autofocus became the baseline expectation for every serious camera, the A55's strange middle ground logic suddenly looked a lot less strange. At number 1, we have the Sony DSC-QX100. And if you have never seen it, take a moment. No screen, no traditional body, no shutter button in the conventional sense. Just a lens barrel, a sensor, some processing hardware, and a clip that attaches it to the back of a smartphone. The phone becomes the viewfinder. The phone becomes the interface. When it launched in 2013, it looked completely unfinished. Like Sony had shipped half a camera and asked you to provide the rest. But that reaction misses the actual question Sony was asking. What if the camera and the smartphone were not competitors fighting for the same pocket? What if they were partners? The phone handling the display, the interface, and the connectivity, while dedicated hardware handled the imaging? The QX100 was Sony testing that premise publicly, with a real product at real scale. Remote shooting through an app. Wireless live preview. Imaging hardware that operated independently of a traditional body. Modular capture, where the sensor and the screen live in different objects but behave as one system. It was impractical in certain situations. The wireless connection introduced lag. The form factor attracted stares. Commercially, it did not cross over into the mainstream, but conceptually it was remarkably precise. Look at how manufacturers talk about app-controlled camera systems today. Look at how smartphones are increasingly used as remote interfaces for dedicated imaging hardware. Look at the entire direction of connected modular photography workflows. The QX100 was a public prototype for all of it, released into a world that was not yet ready to understand what it was watching. And that is ultimately what makes the QX100 the most important camera on this entire list. Not because it was the most refined, not because it sold the most units, but because it asked the most honest question of all. Should imaging hardware and the devices we already carry through life be designed to work together rather than apart? However, that question has not gone away. If anything, the industry is still in the process of fully answering it. Sony just had the nerve to ask it out loud in 2013, in the form of a product you could actually buy. What the QX100 understood before almost anyone else was that the camera body itself was becoming optional. The screen, the sharing, the social layer, all of that was already living in people's pockets. What was missing was better optics, a larger sensor, and dedicated imaging hardware that could plug into that ecosystem without replacing it. Sony built exactly that. It was awkward. It was early. It was misread by almost every reviewer who covered it. And it was more correct about the future of imaging than nearly any camera released in that same year. That is a legacy worth understanding. When you line up all five and look at them honestly, the comedy disappears. The floppy disk was about removing friction before that was a recognized problem. The rotating lens was about designing a digital identity instead of borrowing one from film. The large sensor fixed lens body was about premium simplicity before that market existed. The translucent mirror was about escaping autofocus limitations before mirrorless had proven it could do the same. And the lens that clipped onto a smartphone was about connected imaging before anyone had the language to describe why it mattered. Sony's strange era was not a series of misfires. It was a sustained argument for a kind of photography the rest of the industry would eventually converge on. The timing was often too early. The execution was sometimes imperfect. But the direction was almost always right. And history tends to be far kinder to early ideas than the market ever is. If you made it here, you are exactly who this channel is built for. Subscribe to Alt Buzz Archives so you never miss a breakdown like this one. If you want to go further, channel membership keeps this content independent and deep. The link is right below. And if this video gave you something, super thanks is available under the like button, ranging from $2 to $100. Every single one goes straight back into the next video. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.